Hi, it's Jared from Strong Roots Farm. Today we're going to talk about sharpening your chainsaw blades. This is a very exciting video. I take very good care, or try to, of most of my tools all the time. I'm very particular. One thing I always have is a very sharp chainsaw blade. My blades consistently run straight, they're consistently sharp, and I make them last a long time. But the good news for you is it's not me. I'm nothing special. I really don't know anything special about sharpening chainsaw blades specifically. I just have the right tool for the job. Today, I'm gonna show you that tool right at the beginning of this video. I won't waste your time. I'm gonna go over it, how it works, how it keeps the angles, and some specific things that you need to watch for when sharpening your chainsaw blade. After which, if you're still interested, I'm gonna go into a how-to. How do you use this tool? I'll show you all the methods, what I like, what I don't like, pointing out some key factors, and go through the whole mechanism so you'll see how to use this tool in a day-to-day basis or as you're gonna use your chainsaw. Finally, I'm gonna finish the video up with some troubleshooting. Not all tools are perfect. There are pros and cons with most every tool. And so I have found some particular things that I use when using this tool that help me to be successful every time. And so I'm gonna show you those specific things, show you some things that are not maybe so good about it, but all that is coming up in today's video. Stick around. Behind me, I've got my Stihl MS 271 chainsaw, the Farm Boss. This I have had for over a decade. It has been my main go-to chainsaw. We used it last night, in fact, and today I'm gonna sharpen it with the tool that I'm gonna show you right now. So I have a Timberland sharpener. Zero power needed. This is all it is. I carry this with me. I have a little milk crate that I carry all of my chainsaw stuff in as we go out to the pasture or wherever I'm working on a job site, logging, whatever we're doing. And this is all I need to sharpen my blade. This is what makes my chain so sharp and keeps the angle perfect and keeps them flat underneath. This is the tool that makes me have sharp chains. There are a few things, so we'll talk about points of sharpening a chainsaw blade that I've learned over time that make this blade sharp, cuts like butter, runs straight, not clog up, all those things. So the first is that the sharpness is really right here in the tip point of this blade as it cuts. So on this side here, right on this tip point. So that's where I look. When I see a chain getting dull, I look, how sharp are these points right on the tip of this. Also, I look at these risers. So these are kind of your guides. These are really what set the depth of how much this tooth bites into the tree as you're cutting or limb or whatever. So there's a few key things. One, the smoothness down here in this gap. So you can see I've got a little bit of a jog up right there, but ultimately this curvature in my cutting blade, which is on this side, is flush. It doesn't edge its way up. And that's what some people who use hand tools get. They'll get this angle as it goes up, getting this U smaller and smaller over time. So that has to remain level. That has to stay low. The other thing is this groove has a certain angle. It's actually 30 degrees. And so if you're using a traditional file and you're pushing, as you change the angle of that file and begin to sharpen, the angle of this tooth here and here changes. And so by doing it by hand, you have to either be very, very good and do it a lot, know what you're doing, or like me, you need a special tool. And that's what I use this tool for. This tool, this Timberland sharpener, has a same file system that you would use with a hand file, although it spins, just like a ratchet, similar, you just crank it around. Has a bushing that it goes in, and these bushings, when this locks down on your bar, these are angled. And so for each side, the bushing maintains that perfect 30-degree angle. So now I don't have to be good at this. The tool does it for me. If you use it like you're supposed to, this tool will make sure you maintain the perfect 30 degree, the perfect depth. It won't change from blade to tooth to tooth. So they'll all be exactly the same. They'll all be the same depth. They'll all be level, and they'll all be at the correct angle. That's why my chains are sharp. It's not me, it's the tool. This is not a new tool for me. This same tool, same bushing, same parts, everything, I've had for almost a decade. I think I bought this in 2016. This is still a very reputable company. You can buy this sharpener on Amazon. You can go to their website and buy it, and they do offer replacement parts. From time to time, I've seen these plastic, even though I've never replaced any of these things, any parts on this whatsoever. I've seen guys replace them, and they do offer replacement parts. They seem to have pretty good customer service. I've seen guys say these bushings can go bad over a long time. It's simply an Allen head. You put the new bushing in, and I will tell you, if you put the sharpener in and you start to turn before it feeds in straight, you could nick the inside of this bushing. So I tend to just push in straight, kind of wiggle it back and forth, and when I know the body is in there, then I can start my turn. So there's replacement parts for anything, but there's very minimal parts for this unit. On to our how-to. So if you've made it this far, you want to see how this thing works. So the first thing I do is get my bit, which comes with it. You get one when you buy it, get it installed in. It's a little Allen head, everything's locked down. I tend to put a little bit of oil on this shaft. So type of oil, you can use the same bar and chain oil, you can use motor oil, 3-in-1 oil. I tend to use something clean like a 3-in-1, even a WD-40 is fine. Just something to kind of get it coated to get started here. And then we're gonna mount the sharpener to the chainsaw bar. First step, little pro tip here is you need to find a starting point. And what I have found is this connection, which used to be yellow, but this is a fairly fine used chain. We've used this one a lot. So you either need to find the connection point and get it up at the top. The other way you can find it if your paint is wore off like that is you'll see that there are two blades, two teeth that are pointed the same angle right next to each other, because this is where the chain started and stopped. So I'm gonna start and stop here. So I'll go all the way around doing one side, and then we'll go all the way around with the chain again doing the other angle of tooth. So you gotta have a good starting point. That's where I start, is finding this before we mount it on top. So I'm gonna select which side. I tend to go with the front peg, which is usually my left teeth. So backward angle this way. I'm gonna place this bit into it, screw it around a few times, get whatever oil I got into the bushing, okay? And then I'm gonna place this down on my very first tooth, which would be the tooth that's right behind those double teeth, okay? So now I can rock back and forth just a hair. So I tend to push it to the back, tighten down this screw just a tad, then lean it back forward just a hair, and tighten down these. There's 3 tightening screws on this unit. The front and the back screws tighten this unit to your bar. The middle screw is an adjustment that keeps your chain from bouncing back and forth. It will make sure that all of your teeth are sharpened in the same direction or same angle. So I'm gonna crank these down fairly decent, and then I'm gonna crank in this adjustment to just barely touching that side of that chain. That was step 1, and we did that by putting this bit on that tooth. So you can see my adjustment. Right there is the center screw adjustment that holds this little flap in and out towards. I've got my file placed just inside. Now before I had it screwed in a little further. The next step is to adjust this tensioner. What this tensioner does is it pushes this leg against the tooth, and that determines how sharp, how much you're gonna dig into each tooth. The important part is you set it on the first one, and then you leave it for every tooth after that, ensuring that every tooth has the same depth of sharpness as you go through. I have adjusted this, and I have one tooth up, so there's a right and a left tooth that pushes that forward. I have found it's better. The videos from the manufacturer don't show doing this. This is just something I have found that works better for me. So I've tightened it in, and I have found as I screw in, there is some tension on it. And then when I look at it and inspect it, it's completely sharp. My tooth or my point is good. And so I'm pretty comfortable with how tight this is. And so what I'm gonna do now is I pull the chain forward. Because I have this tooth up, it skips the opposite tooth that was angled the opposite way, and I go to the very next tooth, and then I shove the chain back at the stopping point that we were there. And then I'll proceed to do every tooth on this side. When I am done, I'll switch to the other side. Hopefully now you understand the reason for the starting point and why I always start there, because it helps me to know, have I done all of those? You will be able to tell by looking at it, because the tooth will obviously be shiny and new and sharp, where it looked old and dull before when it was cutting. So I'm gonna continue around this side, and then I'll show a time lapse, and I'll actually time myself doing the other side, which then we can double, and you can say it takes this long to sharpen a blade. But one thing I wanna show you, not sure how well you can see that in this camera, but there's some little fibers. I don't know, guys do this and it works. It doesn't work for me. But there you go. There's like little metal shards on my file. So every time that you push this in and out, those little metal shards either fall at the tool or they get clogged up in that bushing. So what I like to do is just keep a shop towel close, and I just do a little spin and it takes those shards right off. You could also use an air line. You could blow this out. You can play like you were 1989 Nintendo and blow it out with your mouth if you want to. But the more this gets clogged up, the harder it is, and you'll notice that over time if you buy one of these. That's just another little thing that I've learned over time that I continue to do. One last thing. So the other thing I want you to notice is that this file is kind of beveled. It's skinnier at the top than it is the bottom. So when I push into these bushings to ensure that everyone has the same curve, I get this handle all the way against the edge of the bushings. So I screw in until the bushing touches that edge on the tool every time. So that's how deep I go, and that ensures that I get to this straight flat part of the file, and everyone will have the same tooth depth. So I've completed the first side. I'm going to switch sides now to another angle. So I switched my tooth by backing the screw out, flipping which side tooth is down. I did not move the unit. I did not switch the placement of this. You want to leave it in the same as the other side. Just double check everything, but you do have to retension it to the other side. So I'll slowly crank forward until I get about the same tension that I had on the other one. And that seems very good right there. So I've got my first tooth. I'll inspect it. Maybe go a hair more. I'm back to my double tooth back at the top, so now I'll continue on and do this whole side. Okay, we time studied that side. It took me 4 minutes and 50 seconds. So I didn't have any major bulge ups. I didn't have any major chunks, anything like that. I typically don't have any problems with it. Every now and then I'll have to blow that out once or twice each round. You may reapply oil on the second side, but in general, it's whatever your setup time is and 10 minutes to sharpen a blade. So there you have it. That's the how-to. There are pros and cons to this though. So, and I told you I'd talk about them. Let's go. One con to this tool. So we've sharpened our blade now, but because we sharpened the blade on the chainsaw, I didn't really get a chance to take it apart and clean it. And that's very important because in there is the lube hole, which always gets clogged up if you chainsaw a lot. And so if you never take this off and clean this out, you can prevent your chain from lubing. So that's very important. So that would be one con. So I typically, before I even start sharpening, I go ahead and take the entire chainsaw apart, I clean it up, and then I go through the method that you just saw of how we sharpen chains. So when I take my chainsaw apart, it's really important. This hole right here, which is also on the other side of these steels, that is your lube hole. That is where the oil comes from your lube chamber into this bar, keeping your chain lubed. So I have a small screwdriver that I use, and what I do is I take this off. Of course, I'm gonna clean it with a rag or whatever, but this track right here, it's really important that you take, and I clean all the way down this track. So I already cleaned that side. And as I pull stuff out, you should be able to look down in there and see that that's clean. Clean all this out. And what that does is if you don't do that and you leave this chain on with the sharpener, it will wear these guide tooths. That is usually the reason that your chain, or it could be one of the reasons at least, that your chain goes sideways when you're cutting. So it's either that or your teeth are off. But if you're using this sharpener, you should not have teeth that are off angle or off from one to another. That's usually only happens with hand files. It's also important you clean inside your guards. Sure, this is nothing new to you guys. You just have to clean all these little ports out to make sure that the oil can get to the chain. So I clean everything out on the motor itself, on the guards, on those rails. And that is one negative with this sharpener, is if you don't take the time to take the chain off and clean because you're just sharpening and going right back to another job, sometimes you miss this kind of stuff. Your pro for me is that this is all it is. It had a strap, I didn't even use that. I just throw it in my toolbox. I can do this on the back of the Gator, on a tailgate of a truck. I tend to like to do it better in a shop area where you can have a nice height table, but this can be done anywhere. It does not require power. That is a huge pro, but a negative is the time is a little bit longer. So for an electrical power chainsaw sharpener, I don't think they do as good of a job, but they are much faster. One huge pro, obviously, is that this is now a super sharp, ready to go chainsaw blade. It's very nice. It cuts like butter. I have never had any sharpening system that made things this sharp. In fact, I have had professional loggers come to the house with brand new chainsaw blades, and then I sharpened it after their first 15 minutes, and they have told me that this system had their blades sharper than when they got them from brand new. So it's very sharp. But the negative is if you're a guy who's gonna cut a bunch in one day and you like to have 5 sharpened chainsaw blades to take out with you to a job, that's a negative with this system, because essentially you're sharpening one, taking it completely off of the chainsaw, taking the chainsaw apart, putting the next chain blade back on there, bolting everything back up, getting it tightened, run it for a minute so that it gets lubed, and then setting it back up again. So the time, if you're gonna sharpen lots of blades, this may not be the system for you that's best for your time. But I like this. I continually just use this one chainsaw blade over and over. And that's really the problem that I had in the beginning. The negative for me was that when I bought this chainsaw, I got 2 extra blades for free. And I don't even hardly use them. I use this one over and over and over. And then when it was dull and so far down, then I put the next one on. So I never had multiple blades for quick changes. That is really one negative to this system, although I don't really mind. The other thing that this system does not address is the ride height. And so these teeth right here, this is what adjusts the ride height of this tooth. This is what allows keeps the tree away from digging completely fully in there. And you want that. You don't want to shave those guides down, because then your chain will dig too much, and it can cause kickbacks. It can cause the chain to fly off. It can bog the saw down. This top of this tooth to the top of this blade is supposed to be 25 thousandths, but this sharpener doesn't adjust this, so you never really do anything with this. The way I handle those guides is it's just simply a flat file. That guide is here, and you run it across the top. Now, I don't get my micrometers out and test everything for 25 thousandths. I simply look at it, and if it looks like this one's a hair lower, the guide is a hair lower than the tooth, I'm good. How often do I do that? Maybe once every 12, 15 times I sharpen the blade. And so I sharpen this chainsaw. I chainsaw enough. I cut enough wood throughout the year. I probably sharpen this blade 20 to 25 times a year. So twice a year, I'm gonna look at that and maybe file a couple swipes off the top of each guide. I will tell you, there are better professional videos of this unit on the website for the unit, for Timberland sharpeners. There's a few other things I want to talk about with this unit though. I've never seen a professional timber guy, I don't even know what those guys are called. They cut really fast and logging competitions, whatever it would be. I've never seen one of those guys use this. Of course, I've never been to one of those competitions. Those guys typically have electric professional sharpeners. Those electrical professional sharpeners that you get that are bench top or whatever it would be, there's pros and cons to that. One huge con is that there is a vast variety of cheap, junky sharpeners out there on the line. So you don't really know unless you're really around a lot of guys that have them and use them, and maybe you can search YouTube and find a good recommendation. You have to find a good one. If you're gonna use a power sharpener for your blades, you gotta find a good one. That's the first problem. The second problem is those power sharpeners, they take off a considerable amount of metal. So your blades don't last as long. And for me, being frugal on a farm or a homestead, I want my blades to last as long as I possibly can. Even though they're only $25 to $35, whatever you're getting, I have an 18-inch bar. I want that chain to last as long as it possibly can and be as sharp as it possibly can be. So this takes off minimal material, but allows it to be as sharp as it possibly can be. Last, in full transparency, I wanna be very honest with you. This may not be, and it probably is not, the best system on the market. There are some filing systems that work very well. For people who are very critical and do this every day, they use other techniques. I am telling you, I think this is the best system for me, specifically because I'm not good at this. I'm an average Joe farmer who wants to have a sharp chainsaw and do it safely. That's why the angle, all the things that this tool does is so good for me. And so if that's you, if you're just a random guy that chainsaws 2 or 3 times a year, maybe you cut firewood for your house, this is a great system for you. If you're a professional chainsawers, you're probably not even watching this video. Who cares at that point? You know what to do. But for us that just want to keep our blades sharp and don't want to spend $1,000 taking them to somebody to have them sharpened, this is a great method and a great tool for precise chainsaw sharpening. It does work on every size and type of chainsaw. So I recommend the Stihl. It's been a great tool. It's a #1 name brand in this whole market, but there's a lot of cool new electrical, battery-powered chainsaws on the market. There's obviously bigger and stronger and faster chainsaws than what I have with that Farm Boss. This will work with any size bar, any size chain. It's all relative. It all works the same. So if you're a backyardigan and you have a little 12-inch bar electric power corded chainsaw, this will work for you, and it'll work to sharpen those chains. It does not have to be a top of the line Stihl. These are not specific to one certain brand. So I think it's an all around great tool for every model that you have. Last tip I can give to you is understand why your blades get dull. So there's a few main reasons that the average person dulls their blades. One, they're cutting inappropriate things like briars or grass or whatever it would be. You're cutting into something that's not specifically the right kind of wood or whatever it would be. Not saying you have to have a special kind of tree. There's not special blades for special trees. You're just cutting stuff that's not a tree with a chainsaw blade. The most common thing that makes blades dull is getting your blade down in the dirt. I got yelled at all the time as a kid. Keep that blade, keep that chainsaw off the ground. So if you're cutting logs or laying on the ground and you dip it down in the dirt, that is going to be the #1 reason that your blades get dull on an average basis. The other thing is, when I talk about the types of trees, is right now we're clearing fence rind, for instance, and there are some dead trees in there. So dead trees are trees that are half dead, that have a lot of moisture in them when you cut through. Those are going to dull your blades down way faster than a tree that you're felling that is a brand new, fresh, or healthy tree that is just in the wrong place and you need to get rid of it, or perhaps you're logging or trimming or whatever it would be. Those dead trees, things that have a lot of moisture in them, those are going to dull your blades down faster. Well, there you have it. Hope this video helps. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time at Strong Roots Farm.